So before we get into it, I do just want to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people, the traditional custodians of the land where we're meeting today, and their connections to land, sea, and community. Phantm acknowledges and pays respect to the past, present, and future traditional custodians and elders of this nation, and the continuation of their cultural, spiritual, and educational practices. We pay our respects to their elders yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on the call with us here today. So we're really excited to dive in and get this chat going between Dan and Elliot and learn more about sustainability at Thankyou. Before we do, I just wanted to give a little bit of an introduction to both of our speakers today. So Elliot is Phantom's fearless leader. He is our co-founder and the CEO of Phantm. For the past 3 years, Elliot has studied the complexity of our materials problems. He's got a deep understanding, and that has enabled him to develop Phantom's market-leading technology that supports Australian brands in their transition away from problematic materials. Prior to Phantm, Elliot co-founded YGAP, which is a not-for-profit that finds and backs local impact entrepreneurs in some of the world's most vulnerable communities. Under Elliot's leadership as the founding CEO, YGAP backed and funded more than 550 early-stage impact ventures that significantly and measurably improved the lives of 1.1 million people living in poverty. And that organization successfully fundraises over $20 million Australian. Now on to our guest of honor, Dan Flynn. Dan is an inspiring entrepreneur. He's the co-founder and managing director of one of Australia's most successful startups, Thankyou. At just 19, he was compelled by a vision to change the world we live in. So he co-founded the social enterprise Thankyou, which is now globally recognized for its innovation, its disruption, and importantly, its impact. Daniel's journey as a founder is one of grit, of unconventionality, pioneering Thankyou to redefine business as usual and change the world we live in forever. To date, Thankyou has given over $18 million to impactful changemakers in the fight against global poverty. So I would now like to hand the mic over. Sorry, just before I do, there's one last thing I'll share, which is we'd love to hear from you any questions that you have. You're welcome to share those in the chat as the conversation unfolds. And then after that, we will hand those over to Dan and hopefully get to hear the answers to them. So with that, I will hand the mic over to Elliot and Dan.
Thanks so much, Caitlin. Wonderful to be here this morning to join you all online. Dan's a great friend, and I want to start by acknowledging our friendship. With great friendships comes honesty. So I've warned Dan that it won't be a standard type of Q&A. I'm going to push him hard to try and get some quality answers out of Dan. Bit of pretext. I think, Dan, we first met probably about 2008, respectively. Both of our budding sort of startups started in 2008. You with Thankyou, you and Justine with Thankyou, and me with YGAP. If memory serves me correctly, it was an introduction from Jan Owen at Foundation of Young Australians, and I think we met in De Graves, in a cafe in De Graves Street in Melbourne.
Yes.
I remember Jan saying, "You've got to meet this guy who's selling water to change the world." And my first thoughts is, what on earth is he selling water to change the world for? Fast forward 16 years, mate, you've certainly had a profound impact. And it's an honor to join you today. We've spun around the world together on separate planes, working in the humanitarian sector. Today, we have the honor to talk about sustainability. And I'm really proud that you're joining us, mate. So thanks for taking up the time. He did tell me this morning that he's not feeling well. I said, please jump out of bed, because we've got a list of great people that are coming to hear you speak about sustainability and what Thankyou's already doing and thinking about doing. So we're going to cover both what's happening in the market, but also what you're going to be doing in the future. So by way of introduction, thanks, Dan. Thanks for your time. I'm really excited that you can join. I just want to jump straight in and talk about your journey. Just maybe from the top, 2 things that, with honesty, that you think you would do differently if you had your chance again.
Elliot, thank you for the kind introduction, referencing our friendship and then how hard this is going to be for me. So I appreciate that. The warning, this could be the end of our friendship. You guys are watching it live. But a lot of respect for your journey prior to Phantm, and then obviously the work we're doing together. Two things I wish we did better. One's probably more a personal perspective, and maybe one for the business and for the enterprise that we built. I think one of the great things about youthful energy, and I was 19 when we started this, is you just want to make change. Yeah, let's go. And that is needed. And I wouldn't want to wish that away. But as we've grown up, we've learned how to keep that intention with consideration and deeper consideration. And that's certainly something in the sustainability space that is so important. It's every step you take, what is the maybe unintended consequences of it? And over time at Thankyou, we have stumbled on many unintended consequences. Some would look very obvious, like how you felt in the Grave Street in Melbourne, and we can unpack that in 2008. And some actually less obvious, some that have taken us years to discover some of the unintended consequences. And certainly from a giving perspective and how we give as a philanthropic foundation, there's been a lot of learning and unlearning in that. So I would say, in short, it is, if I could go back again, it's keeping the youthful, like that naivety, but really add a stronger tension with consideration and getting more inputs and more wisdom and more counsel. That's part one. Part two, I wish there was no link between your personal leadership journey and the things that you wrestle with and its effects on an organization or a mission or a vision. And younger me would have said, oh, they're very separate. And then over time, with great advisors, mentors, and a really good psychologist, it was confronting to go, wow, like the stuff I wrestle with on the inside has really big flow-on effects. And I kind of wish, and certainly when I meet people coming up, I say, hey, so quickly as a leader, or if you're leading a project, you work on the mission and the project. Take time to work on you. Because the soft stuff, the inside, the stuff that you think, it doesn't really matter, can actually be the most critical things. And anyway, that's the short version of a deeper story there.
Awesome. There's a lot to unpack there. If we had a separate webinar on the humanitarian sector, I'd love to drill into the lessons you've learned on your giving. That's your purpose, that's your existence, and I know how hard you guys have worked to stay different. But we are focused on sustainability. So the real key thing there was unintended consequences. And I think that's a theme we should continue to pick up on, especially as we start to dig into your product sustainability strategy. But before we get there, let's just talk about personal care and the category. You sort of shifted from water into personal care. Why? Well, what was the reason at Thankyou that you jumped into a whole new category in personal care?
So for those who don't know the kind of the mission that we set out on, it was this idea of one world, two extremes. You've got extreme poverty, so 716 million people right now living in it. Then you have what we would term extreme consumerism, but ultimately consumerism. We're spending collectively $69 billion a year on stuff. Bottled water was our first product. And in our head, it was a very confronting product to us as humans, because it shouldn't exist. It's the most ridiculous product on the planet, but it did. At the time, $600 million was spent on it in Australia, 50 billion worldwide. And right now, even though we all say we don't buy bottled water, it has grown to $350 billion. So it's still one of the fastest growing beverage categories. And so we thought, okay, this will be our starting point. And we had a few thoughts. One was, and there'll be some really easy wins from a sustainability perspective. We'd already been investigating biodegradability and some stuff. Like, that'll be easy. And then in time, we'll use the water to teach people the concept that as a consumer, your vote, your choice can make an impact. We'll derive profit from that and we'll give that. And then in time, we'll go into more categories. So if you met us day one, we had dreams of every Thankyou, anything, probably except cigarettes maybe, and guns, but like we were like, Thankyou could be anything because it's an idea, not a product. Turns out though, it was hard. Water as a category is hard up against Coca-Cola. Also, all of the sustainability things we saw were quite gimmicky at best. And the further we dug into them, it was confronting. They weren't necessarily better options. They just sounded better. And we got to this interesting point 5 years in where we're like, water for us is the core of the business, but it's not the future that we see. We expanded into a few categories, so into food and into personal care, because it's products that people buy. And ultimately, that's what drove the decision, is like, how do we meet you, Elliot, Daniel? How do we meet you every day in multiple touch points? And personal care is a fascinating category. It is actually, the more we've got into it over the years, the more we've learned to love it and discover some really interesting insights in the category. For example, how cheap it is sometimes to make a good product, whilst brands will use that exact cost structure and then they'll charge retail prices that are so incredibly insane. Yeah. And consumers buy it thinking they're buying something here that cost here. And we just thought, well, let's just make it and sell it for here. And that got us to the #1 hand wash in Australia for 5 years and some of the highest loyalty in the category. And so, we've seen personal care as one of the ways to get this thank you message across. But like any category, it is difficult to A, sustain as a business model, but B, be sustainable in that space. So that's what you find us.
So you probably, I don't know the exact date, but you're probably 10 years into personal care. Is that fair, give or take?
Yep. 10 years, literally.
And so last year, large statements around Thankyou reimagining personal care and the whole category. How have you done this, and what's behind that claim?
So literally a year ago, almost today, we launched a campaign called Thankyou Reimagined, and for us it was actually a reimagining of ourselves was the first message. But then at a category level, there was an element and a spectrum of reimagining. And in personal care, what that looked like is we'd been on a multi-year journey transitioning from the business that people saw on shelf, which was, it's a recycled plastic bottle, with a pump lid that isn't recyclable because of the spring in it, which is sort of the, one of the many secrets or dirty secrets out there, really. It sold well, and we derived profit for our mission, but we didn't feel like it was the product that should A, be Thankyou on shelf in Australia long term, and B, it's not the product we wanted to take to the world. So for us, Thankyou in Australia has been a test of a model that we are now scaling up to Asia, Europe, and then the US. We have some amazing retail partners and people looking to take the product, but we wanted to make sure that what they took was the Thankyou we envisioned, both from an innovation and sustainability perspective. And so our journey was getting it ready for the world on all fronts, from design, sustainability. And that was a very long and hard and at times confusing journey. We started out with some goals that changed. Plastic free was, one of the early goals. And I think one thing that marketers and, humans are really good at is latching onto little ideas and handles. And so we'd latched onto that as one of the points, and we had to challenge that. Certainly what you see today has, plastic in the refill system. But we had to take a measured approach, a considered approach. And today on shelf, you'll see Forever Bottles, which is a product that comes in a recycled aluminium or a glass bottle. So 2-tiered approach. You buy that product once, and then we have a 100% recycled HDPE refill system. And that's what people see on the shelf today. And then we have an innovation pipeline, which maybe we'll get into this. Maybe we'll touch on that a little bit later. But I think for us, what you see today is definitely a huge step forward from where we were. It's probably not the most reimagined thing we've put out on shelf in the last 12 months. I think our cleaning range probably took the win for that, with its dilution ability, and it's the first 100% natural hospital grade cleaner in market, which is exciting. So look, that's where we're up to. But yeah, long road ahead. So
you talked about design and sustainability. Clearly, that's the drive, you need a comprehensive strategy in place to get there. So I want to press you a little bit on sustainability. Before doing so, we went out to, some of the leading brands in Australia across personal care, some across the beauty industry too. Many of you are represented on this call who want to hear how you got to the Forever bottle, but what you're thinking about doing in the future and how important material innovation is. One of many great responses, people excited, signing up, others that were apologies that couldn't fit this time. One response I got, and I quote, was a nameless person, but said, seriously, what would Dan Flynn know about sustainability? What a joke. Maybe if you guys did some research, you would know who the experts are in the field. So I just want to ask you, Dan, what do you know about sustainability? What is it about Thankyou that makes you different? And what does sustainability mean to your organization?
Look, it's an interesting question. I think we're good at questions like that in the sustainability space. People are good at forming a view and then taking a little stab, and that's okay. It's a bit of a jabby space. Look, Pete, who's our head of sustainability, should probably be sitting here right now because he knows more than me. But I can tell you what we do know at Thankyou. We know this. We know it's an absolute wrestle to get ultimately sustainable product into market at scale. And where you find us is you find us in the middle of that wrestle. You find us testing ideas, and you find us challenging things, and you find us taking steps that maybe others haven't taken. An interesting previous step we took in bottled water was removing it from the shelf. Now, as a bottled water company, which is what ultimately people knew us for, taking your product off the shelf is a surprising move. It was surprising to the retailers who each said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, here's how we've arrived at this decision." And, it made sense to us that as a brand, we had a product that is ultimately single-use environmental enemy number one. And it's almost the poster child for it. And every single innovation that we looked at in the space, ultimately, when we zoomed out to the bigger picture of sustainability and looking at everything from carbon, end of life, like deeply considering waste, deeply considering water consumption, the solutions weren't better. And so we made the call to pull it off the shelf, that was the most responsible thing we could do. It's probably the most irresponsible thing you can do from a commercial perspective, just to put it out there, because you don't get any money. But we said, it's okay. As a brand, we can hold this. We're in other categories. We've got some other innovation coming. And in time, when it's right, when the innovation's there or the material innovation is at a point, maybe we can come back into the water category. And we've hinted at that for some time. And we look forward to that day. And I thought when we exited that category, 12, 24 months maybe, and here we are years later. And by the time we get back, it'll be half a decade or more, which will be just wild. But we'll be back, and Thankyou and Phantm meeting on an exciting future project. But back to what I said at the start, what do we know about sustainability? We know it's intrinsically linked to our mission, because for us, yes, we want to make as much money as we can to help end extreme poverty. But we see an intrinsic link to how we consume as consumers and the effect that has on people from an ethics perspective and on planet. And so what a lot of people don't see, which I would say is the case for many companies, is what you are working on behind the scenes. Sometimes it makes it into the real world. And I'll give an example. We invested a lot in a plastic-free range of personal care. So this included hair care, this included body washes, and it was in a plastic-free solid state. Think soap bars, but right across the range. And we launched that into major retail here in Australia, Coles, Woolworths. Huge investment from a development perspective, testing, consumer, all the things you do around it, and then the marketing investment. Now, from a sustainability perspective, this was by far the best decision for Thankyou Personal Care. And there would be a case to say, okay, you have the existing range that's on shelf today. You could basically phase it out. Maybe we could even do a water play where we could pull that out and put this in. Conservatively, we launched it alongside, to try and just prove to ourselves that this has got potential and We invested in it, and it was quite shocking. The results were shocking. I mean, it was, it was the most sustainable play I think you probably could have at the time in personal care, but it didn't work. Consumers didn't buy it. Retailers from day one, we're keen to drop it based on its performance, and obviously we would fight the fight to say, just given everything you say publicly about sustainability and everything we're about, maybe it's worth we give this little range a shot. And so we held on as long as we could, and we marketed as hard as we could. But ultimately, one of the challenges, I think, to sustainability at scale is consumer adoption. And so we didn't get enough people moving to it. We could win some awards for the innovation. And so we not only got that range delisted, but every dollar invested in that step gone. And so that was a really interesting hit for us. And so back to the drawing board. And so today what you see is absolutely not anywhere close to some of the sustainability credentials that range had. But where you find us in the wrestle is trying to get a consumer who's addicted to single-use plastic bottles, pumps, and just buying them, chucking them out, putting them in the recycle bin with the lid on it, with the spring in it, and just you have a consumer there, you have a retail sector that's absolutely favors and built for that. And then you find us basically wrestling to try and get people to think different and take further steps. And so, I'm excited about where we are today, because I know how hard fought it's been, and how hard fought it still is. And I'm probably more excited, as most optimists are, about the future. And okay, what innovation next step can we take?
So let's dive into that. Most people here today are interested in your product innovation and these packaging decisions you've made, specifically with the Forever bottle. We've heard the background, what led it. There's a clear motive and drive to do better. What's been the feedback? Are you happy about how it's been received? You're clearly optimistic, but have your customers said, fuck yeah, this is what we want? Or are they gone, hey, hold on, this doesn't add up and I don't like the functionality? Are you willing to share some of that sort of intel from customers?
Yeah. Look, we've had mixed feedback, some good feedback and some different challenging pieces of feedback, which I think it's part of that wrestle. And just to see Maria's little comment to clarify, did consumers not like, what did they not like? Actually, consumers, every time we tested the product, liked the idea of the product and the product itself. But when it came down to price point and that value proposition, I think that's where it got really tricky. Like, good innovation and sustainable product is expensive. And even, so I would say there's some things we have attempted. Currently, if you see our Forever bottles on shelf, they're not very cheap. They're good value, but in a market that is right now feeling the pinch at a consumer level, I would say, Elliot, that's probably one of the biggest pieces of feedback is like, oh, it's a bit of a jump to get into Forever bottles. We have two. So we have our recycled aluminium bottle, and then we have our glass bottle. Some people love recycled aluminium, the look of it, or just aluminium in general. But I would say it's quite a small group like the look of that and the feel of that. So one piece of feedback is like, oh, I like the idea of it, but I don't know if I love that material. Now, in our matrix of materials, it leads in terms of sustainability on a few fronts. Certainly when you compare it to glass comes second to that. But from a design perspective, the feedback on glass has been remarkable and people love it. And you can see through it. There's a whole bunch of design boxes that ticks, which is why we made it. In fact, if we'd taken a very purist approach from a sustainability perspective, we wouldn't have made glass. But our hunch was actually at a consumer level, this may not hold up. So we have taken that two-tiered approach, and the overall feedback has been really good. Price has been, a challenge, and so we've played with some ideas on like how do we lower it, how do we discount, how do we get people into the system? Because once you're in, then you buy refills and you refill. And there's some work to be done in that space. Overall, it's a win. I think at a retail level, transparently, it's challenging because the run rates you're compared to you are compared to, cheap, fast moving product that, so right now I would say you know, our forever bottles have got question marks over it in terms of not from a sustainability perspective, but from a run rate compared to, you know, what is the most popular and what consumers are the most used to. And that is one of the great challenges we are, you know, seem to be forever wrestling.
Awesome. I've got a couple more questions for you. We do want to spare time for members who have joined today to ask questions directly to you, Dan. There was a question on regulation. Well, I think we'll come to that in a sec, but it was connected to material innovation, and that's a question I'd love to drill down on, given you know, problematic materials and certainly components that are problematic that make the whole packaging difficult to, you know, have a you know, feasible good end of life. I just want to ask a question: how important material innovation is for you at Thankyou in solving the high and fundamentally unacceptable number of products that are currently going to landfill?
So, I mean, it is one of our core focuses in our responsible business goals. So, you know, we talk about reducing carbon, reducing waste, and certainly looking at end of life. And so, like hopefully everyone on this call, there is the intention and the vision and the mission to take better and more sustainable steps. Then we have our current runway and our future. So in the current runway, if everyone opens our bottles, and this is true of not just our forever bottles, but our existing range too, you'll open it up and you'll see no spring in that lid. And that spring-free lid, that is, you know, and others are starting to move into that space, is more expensive. Like commercially, it's like, if you're pure commercial, you're like, nah, this does not make any sense. But the reason we think it makes sense is because ultimately this matters, end of life matters. And that spring coming out is one of many steps that need to happen across product and innovation. Consumers are starting to wake up to it. But, you know, aside from consumers waking up to it, it's the right decision. So, you know, that's some of today, what you see on shelf. I think tomorrow, you know, if we'd met 2-3 years ago and you said to me, you're going to make 1 liter and 3 liter refills, and they're going to be a plastic, a HDPE, a recycled plastic, I'd be like, never. That's not what we're going to do. And we'd explored so many other materials. However, unfortunately, where that landed, that was the best. It's kind of like the best of the worst options. And it's so I hope that the future call we're reviewing, cool, next step. Now, if you're on the call going, why didn't Thankyou go dissolvables or concentrates? We've got innovation in both. We've looked at it for a very long time. Herein lies one of the challenges, is where are consumers at? Where is that, the mass middle? Where are they really at? And they're not there yet. And a lot of brands are popping up. And I think you could sustain that innovation and get a very small customer base in Australia, America, Asia. And like as a business, you could go on that journey, and some have done that. And that's good. That should happen. That's how we move forward as a society, with that innovation. The challenge is that mass, where a lot of the volume is and a lot of the problems are. We see a priority in like, okay, how do we engage in this group, and how do we get them in a different system? And you know, I can tell you right now, in personal care, people want something that feels not too watery. And you'd think surely that's not too high on the priority list, and it turns out, you know, it's one of the many things it is. Yeah, so it's a challenge.
So it's clear you've got values and priorities in your sustainability strategy. To drive that, you need to make, you know, material assessments and use data to support those sustainability strategies. I might put you on the spot a little bit here, Dan, but I'm going to ask Caitlin to screen share a redacted page, something we've delivered at Phantm to you. It's a few months ago, so hope your brain gets refreshed by seeing this. Taken away the data because it's, you know, private to your company, but I just want you, in your own words, to talk to this slide. This was the main comparison report we did for you at Thankyou, comparing competitors. If you remember this, it was a few months ago. Anything you want to talk to about this spider graph?
Yes, awesome. So I mean, this is, you know, it's talked about at the very start, this tension between, you know, you want to make a change and then considered change and how important that is because of unintended consequences. what was interesting about this list from memory, these are actually all global, brands, or at least brands who are doing quite well and have a sustainability claim. So they're claiming that, hey, by choosing our product, this is a sustainable choice. This is green. This is some sort of, and that's how it's marketed, and that's what consumers think they're buying into. As we've made a decision, and if we've been on this journey of which material do we move to, it's fascinating when you see it mapped, when you're like, wow, that's not as good as it sounds. And certainly when you compare it to other options out there. And so, I think, that graph on the right-hand side there, where you see a highlight around global warming, carbon for us is one of the considerations, and it probably leads slightly above water and waste, but they're all intrinsically linked. I think we've gone with, in the current work we're doing you guys with, is, from memory, maybe it's that red triangle, but I'll have to double check that later. But I think it's really interesting, because actually what a lot of consumers think is a better option sits on those bigger triangles, which absolutely isn't. But it's absolutely marketed that way. And so I think, I'm good, and I should say bad, but I'm good at grabbing onto ideas or little handles, or like, how good would, aluminium be, or boxed water? That could be the future of water. That's, some people are claiming that's good. And I think it's the data and the depth of work in looking at these tensions of, in this case, from water, global warming, or carbon and fossil fuel use, you start to see a clearer picture. And so this has helped inform us of literally the next step. And then there are commercial considerations, and that's a whole nother graph. And you overlay that as well. And it's always interesting to see. Sometimes the better options are also maybe the more expensive, some would say commercially unviable options. And that's the role, I think, of entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship, is to find a way to get those little triangles into the real world and at scale.
That's awesome. I'll wrap up with something you've already sort of touched on. We do want to spend as much time as possible allowing others to ask questions of you, because there's some great questions coming through on the chat too that we should really focus on. But you've alluded to water. I did just want to give you an easy question on what's next, or what you're willing to share about what's next. You can dive a bit deeper into water, or if there's other stuff, certainly around personal care, just a quick 30 seconds on what's next for Thankyou.
Yeah, look, we're expanding on a few fronts. So you'll see product popping up in more countries, which is exciting. It's finally happening across Middle East, Southeast Asia, then Europe. So that's one front. I think from an innovation perspective pipeline, there's a big pipeline. Water is, being teased, it's coming back. But, pending on a lot of work that you guys are doing. And I think our theory of what this is going to be is so exciting, and we're all working to go, great, can it be reality at scale, at volume? And that's the work happening right now. But, part of me just wants to wake up, and it's done, but I know there's still some time left. You will see Thankyou popping up in some new categories. And I think next year, if one of our major projects lands, it's going to be surprising to people. It's outside of consumer goods. And so from a sustainability perspective, it's a different set of problems, but it's radically different to some of the things you wrestle with in consumer goods. So yeah, look, big journey ahead. But you said 30 seconds, I should stop.
You've done very well. Caitlin, I might flick back to you. We are going to go to a Q&A, which I'll help curate, but I'll let you take the mic for a moment.
Thanks, Elliot. And thank you, Dan. That was a fascinating discussion. It actually flew by for me, and there are at least 6 other questions I'd like to hear the answers to, but it sounds like some people in the chat are feeling the same way. So just briefly, before we hop into that, I did want to share for those who are on the call today who might be new to Phantm or unfamiliar with Phantm, a little bit more about the kind of work that we do, both the support that we provided to Thankyou, but also how we help other leading brands. So we talk about what we do as sustainability made easy. It's obviously a very, very complex space to navigate. You spoke to some of the nuance around it today. And we like to think that we take the guesswork out of that. that we can provide confidence to the decisions that you're making around your products and your packaging. It's affordable, it's independent, it's credible, and our life cycle analyses are ISO certified. And additionally, they provide actionable insights. So we sort of got a bit of an overview in terms of the support that we provided to Thankyou. So we provided life cycle assessments. You saw that screen grab of the spider graph. That's from a comparison analysis that we conducted. We also did some refill and reuse modeling so that you could deeply understand the Thankyou Forever bottle and moving from buying a new bottle every single time you need to replace your soap to moving to that refill and really deeply understanding the environmental impact of such a change. Importantly, we also enable responsible storytelling. So avoiding greenwashing is so important, particularly with the ACCC's crackdown. And that's a really key piece of value. So we work with leading brands in Australia and around the world, like Unilever, Starbucks, Qantas, and Mecca. And we enable them to measure and manage their environmental impact. That modeling piece I spoke to before, we can do that across a range of different scenarios, not only refill and reuse. And then we support the transition to more sustainable options as well as systems change. We can also provide an independent evaluation of your existing suppliers if you're looking to make a change of prospective suppliers and market. And lastly, just to reiterate and really underscore, avoiding the pitfalls of greenwashing is really important. Compliance is critical to avoid penalties. We do have a special offer for everyone on the webinar with us today, which is a 30-minute free sustainable packaging consultation. And that's actually with our head of strategy, Ed Whitehead. And I just want to talk about why it's so important and valuable to get that time with Ed. He has 25 years experience in building and shaping a flexible packaging business in the UK and across Europe. He's Australian, he's living in Australia now and is Australian, despite having come from the UK, and he's actively engaged with APCO, AIP, and other industry bodies. Throughout his career, he has worked with the likes of Tesco, Marks and Spencer's, Sainsbury's, and Aldi, and he has a passion for and expertise in sustainability and the circular economy. He's developed global award-winning packaging solutions with a real emphasis on cutting-edge materials to deliver better end-of-life outcomes. So for anyone that is interested in taking up that offer, we'll be sending out an email later today with instructions. I will now hand the mic back over to Elliot and Dan. We've got a few really interesting questions in the chat, and as I'm sure many others would like to hear the answers to those.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. Keep them coming through. There's a lot to digest. Susie asked a great question around end of life, specifically compostable materials and soft plastics. I'll have a crack at that in a moment, Dan, but the focus is on you. So we'll get out a few questions to you, and then I'll endeavour to answer Susie's question because I think it's relevant for anyone that's involved in this space. Question came through, not sure the first name, but RC Oxford, just around how the developed world and our move to renewable and sustainability is impacting poor and developing world. I think that's a really relevant question for you, Dan, and is helping lift poor people out of poverty. So that intersection of what we do here and the ramifications elsewhere, call a spade, so much of our waste has been shipped overseas. And as we improve our infrastructure here, that doesn't, or even our packaging here, that doesn't automatically mean there's a great end-of-life system where infrastructure is poor. And I just want you to touch on that because that's relevant for you with your focus on sustainability here and your mission of alleviating poverty around the world.
Oh man, this is like any question in this space. It's layered and it's complicated, and I'd say the short version, and we are not the experts in this space. There are wins for the world's poor, definitely, and there are challenges, and I think both need to be addressed here. I think there's a massive challenge around, plastics and recycling and things being shipped offshore. I think there's a great move to, we talk about making sure products are made from recycled product, and that's from a sustainability perspective. That's great. we started pushing back into sources of where is the recycled plastic coming from. And very quickly, some places it's very traceable, others basically goes to this big black hole where ultimately the hypothesis, and a few people are talking about it, a lot of it's coming from pickers, so children picking plastic on rubbish heaps in developing nations. Now, some would say that's great, at least they have a job. We'd also call that child labor, incredibly unsafe, it's incredibly horrible, but this new wave of like, we need lots of recycled plastic that we can claim to consumers that it's made from recycled plastic, it's actually fueling this whole space, and it's quite dangerous and fraught with challenges. And so everything we do, it sounds great here, has these unintended realities. And I think this is a real wrestle. So we're pushing into, and this is only just one little point, man, there's so many. I think the world we all want to live in is that decisions we make today benefit not just us, but others and society as a whole. And so I'd say the challenge to us is, well, let's just make sure that happens. And what's better for the world? Virgin plastic or recycled plastic picked by children? Good question, big question. It's a wrestle. I think the ultimate answer would be recycled plastic, not built and picked by children. And that's a, seems like an obvious one, but it's actually quite hard to get to. So just one point. Elliot.
They're really difficult questions to answer. And you know, you as head of Thankyou isn't supposed to have the perfect answer. I think these have to be open discussions because sustainability isn't linear at all. And you know, what's best for one organization or individual may be different for another. But actually being frank and talking about, you know, the complexity, but also the challenge and therefore the opportunity is so healthy. What I've loved about Thankyou in the past is you've been honest, you've made mistakes, you've been very open about those mistakes publicly. Not all organizations are, and I hope that continues, especially as you make more informed packaging and product decisions. Jan asked a great question around environmental sustainability and corporate strategy, specifically why biodiversity is not a key metric and measure for businesses, and is that of interest to you? We talk a lot about people and planet in our conversations. Do you want to touch on biodiversity and why that wasn't a measure for you, or whether that is a consideration for Thankyou?
Yeah, look, I think it's a good question, and I think we should be growing in our view on sustainability. And I think this is probably maybe one of the next frontiers where that language is going to be filtered through. I know in some of the end of life work we're doing, and we're thinking about the materials that we're looking at, you know, when you compare it to what plastic is doing from a biodiversity perspective, it's the solution. It's going to be good for people, planet, animals, you know, all parts of the environment. And I think we're genuinely interested in that. It isn't currently one of our measures, but we do find it interesting. And, you know, I think we should review ourselves and look at, do we add this in? I think what's beautiful is that some of the work in Phantm, and without doing an ad for Phantm, like we've tried to basically build Phantm in Thankyou. I didn't tell Elliot this, but like we've tried to build our own teams, and like you need people in-house. We have some amazing people who think about this, but you actually need partners who are like 24/7 living and breathing. And so I've found this really helpful, this journey with Phantm. We have a few other partners in the space as well. But I think what I love about some of our future exploration is, you know, from a biodiversity perspective, if we make some of these moves, it's certainly better than what's existing in the market today. And so to me, that's really interesting, and we're curious about it, but it's, you know, probably should be measured soon.
Maria, that's a great question on the reality of shifting materials if it's not as affordable when customers don't want to pay, and neither do manufacturers. I presume she's a manufacturer, so that's, you know, there's sunk cost in machinery, there's embedded business models that don't want to be changed. You've touched upon it a bit, that price sensitivity, especially in the cost of living crisis. Is there anything you want to build upon there? How you push, you've got a very good following. How do you push them to pay more for better packaging? If there's anything you want to unpack there, Dan. So
I know as humans, we love simple, like give us the simple solution. There isn't one. It's this conundrum, and I mean, Rubik's Cube is sort of the best experience, I would say we like, yes, we nailed it. That whole side's green. That side's now messier than it was. So this challenge of consumer, I mean, that Forever bottle has just won an award. It's the Dylan Awards 2024. We came third in the world. It's a New York Design Award. It's amazing. It's, you know, and so from some respects, and there was over 10,000 submissions, it's an award-winning design-led bottle. And we're using design to try and get people to really like aspire to have a more sustainable solution. But also we know that design and that desire leads that. And so for us, I would say the challenge is, and the challenge to anyone on this call is, you basically have to tick every box. You have to tick that desirability, which is a real marketer's challenge and a design challenge and a creative challenge. You tick functionality, and that feeds into it. But you have to tick the price challenge too, and you have to find a way. For us, Forever bottles are an expensive entry, but our view is that actually, as a consumer, you save money over time, because if you buy into refill at 1 litre, or especially at 3 litre, I mean, at a 3 litre level, price per mil, you end up winning. You save more money as a consumer than if you just stayed and played the game at the 500 mil fill bottle. So that is our way of trying to tick a box. And actually, we've seen really good uptake in the 3 litre. So I would say if you're approaching this, you're led by sustainability to make a material shift, but you need everything else to line up to. And that is the Rubik's Cube.
Awesome. I want to respect people's time, so I'm going to fly through the last 2 or 3 questions, and we can just answer them in under a minute. But one question was from M Manatak. What was your logic behind not taking a concentrated in-store refill or soap bar journey? So that, I guess that's a question to your relationship with your retailers.
Yeah, so it's a mixture of our appetite and retail appetite. And that's a real part of the conversation, their view on where a category is at. And it's a dance. So that's a short version of a long story. We tried soap bars and obviously didn't hit the run rates. Personally, I love the idea of concentrates. I think they're really cool. And we like others' innovation. We like our innovation in the space. You don't see them in real life yet. And that's a project. I mean, to me, it's like it's the win. It's the win for the consumer dollar. It's the win for people and planet. But unfortunately, the rate of adoption by consumers for every other brand that's been out there is very, very dismal, and retailers know it, and therefore they don't want to stock it. So there is I would say, respectfully, in retail, there is a disconnect between the sustainability vision and goals, and then what happens at a category level. And I'm not being disrespectful to anyone, but that disconnect is tricky because I think concentrates, the whole shelf should be full of them, but it's not.
Yeah. So let's drill down a bit there, because there's a question from Rob on leadership. You've been honest around the refill in-store option. What about, he's asked about the spring example. It's one thing to take consumers on a journey. It's a whole other thing to take competitors or, like-minded organizations on a journey of change. Have you noticed your leadership and your decision transact to others? Well, it's not the transaction, but certainly lead to others following?
Yeah, so let me start by saying that spring-free lid as an example. We talked about it for years, but people had to make it. And those that made it, we saw others start to make the jump in other parts of the world. And we're like, oh, yes, let's go. So what I think is cool about leadership is it's inspiring. So we took this step because we've talked about it. This is a real solution. Yeah, I think it was 5 times the cost, and maybe that'll come down soon, maybe 4. Anyway, it's not great. But if we all adopted it, man, that solves an issue, and it'll bring the price down, and so people have got to move, right? And one would argue it's very on brand for Thankyou to move. And I would say that's true. It's sort of the blessing and the curse of a brand that says, hey, we're here for good. You get to do the good, and hopefully it adds up later. And so that's the space you find us in. I hope more and more people take that spring-free lid up concept. Everyone should. And if we all did, it's a win for everyone. And so anyone on the call who's like, oh, it's so expensive right now, it's almost like we just need to get on some other group chat and we're like, okay, but let's all do it. And if we all did it, it's a win. And I think more of that would be great.
Awesome. I want to finish up after this. I'm hoping someone in our team can actually answer Susie's question, but I do want to end on regulations. So as maybe that gets put into the chat for a better answer. There was a question on how important regulations is for you at Thankyou, and that impacts your vision. Objectively, I see you as a leader that thinks beyond the immediate regulation, what's coming. I can talk to Susie's question a little bit about compostability and soft plastics, but let's hear from you first, Dan, around how important regulations are for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's in the innovation journey, it's another factor, and it's an important factor, and it needs to be respected and at times not moved past. It's there for a reason. A lot of great thinking's gone into it, and that's cool for the regulations that serve humanity. And then sometimes there's just some regulations or some ideas there that you take a step back and you think, okay, the intention of the regulation is right. The outworking of it, maybe it's outdated. Maybe we've learned more. And so one of the projects that Phantm and Thankyou are working on, to land it at scale, we probably need the regulators to dream big with us. On like theoretically, it absolutely is a win-win-win-win for the reason why their current regulations exist. Now, one would argue, well, look, that's just a long journey, and why bother? But I think that's how the world changes. Is conversations like this. So we respect regulations that are built in, but we wonder on the other side of them if there are other paths forward, and that's not something that we do alone. Others do that too. Elliot, maybe over to you.
Yeah, look, it's probably this is our first webinar. So Dan, you are our first guest, which is a nice segue into what we're doing next week with Kate Forbes, Head of Innovation at Mecca Imagination. We might need to do a whole separate webinar to answer Susie's question. But in short, it's complex, it's evolving and it's changing. We're in a federation, this country, so every state has different regulations, and they have the autonomy to change those regulations at whim. Talking about compostability, there is a national waste strategy, and there's some pretty strong objectives there for 2030, 2050. In short, with the exception of SA and WA, the compostables is banned from going in FOGO bins. For the core reason that PFAS, one of forever chemicals, one of many forever chemicals that should never exist, traces were found in some compostable materials. So for good reasons, New South Wales EPA came out first and banned compostables. Others have followed. This is an issue, but it's also necessary. Our belief is, as you take away those forever chemicals, and the FOGO end-of-life bins improve, that compostables should be accepted, and there's some great technologies improving around windrow degradability, so we will see a change. Hopefully it is a national legislation. So evolving space right now, broken down into the states. In terms of soft plastics, Susie, another great question. There's disarray since the collapse of Red Cycle. What's coming up to sort of 18 months ago. It's a bit of a frozen space at this stage. There was a few promises from the major retailers, certainly Coles, Woolies and Aldi, that were coming together. The ACCC allowed them to work together, so it wasn't a form of collusion to develop a solution. There's a lot of technologies that's evolving. There's a lot of hope in that space that we can find a chemical solution to soft plastics. I think we all want it to exist because we need it right now. But it's not going to be the panacea. The major problem with Red Cycle was offtake. So what happens at the end of life with that product? And if there's no place for it to go, there's only a certain amount of park benches you can build with, all the chemicals that are being produced and repurposed through chemical recycling. So it's in the wings, but I think better innovations required across, all sectors, not just personal care that we're here to talk to about today. So there might be something thrown in the chat. It's a big question. That's hopefully a partial answer to your long question, Susie, and we'll set up another time. I just want to end by thanking you, Dan. It's just always good to talk to you. It's great to do it publicly. It's the first time we've ever had a public chat. So it's nice to take our private conversations online for the world to see. So thanks for your time, for jumping online when you're not 100%. It's truly appreciated. We love working with you. We've been very honest that you're a key customer of ours. We've got Mecca next Wednesday, 11 a.m. If anyone wants to join, we'll send an email out, a Humanitics offer. And lastly, we, as Caitlin said, we do have a free consultation available with Ed Whitehead. Whenever we do the big thank you calls, customer calls, Ed's there. He's our head of strategy. He knows materials better than anyone else. He undersells himself, but we love promoting him because that 25, 30 years of experience in material innovation is who, I guess, anyone that's thinking about sustainability, that's thinking about progress, that's thinking about change, Ed's the type of guy that you need to speak to help solve these complex problems. So thanks again, everyone. We're on the hour. Good to see you again, Dan, and we'll hopefully see you next Wednesday.